You're tuned to K-Squid 90.7 FM and streaming online at ksqd.org. And coming up next, Exploring Santa Cruz. Welcome to Exploring Santa Cruz. My name is Jean KRATZER. I'm the host for today, and my guest today is Erica BERG. And Erica, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me as well. There's a great deal that I could say about Erica by way of introduction. She has remarkable skills, talents, and experiences, but we're going to focus in on just a few. One of the most important things to say about Erica is how much she loves animals of all kinds. She is, for example, a volunteer at the Marine Mammal Center in Moss Landing. And there she participates in beach rescues of marine mammals that are sick or injured. She also does other kinds of rescues. She is a member of the equine evacuation team for Santa Cruz County. There she assists in evacuating horses and other farm animals. And one of the places to which they can be evacuated is a very beautiful facility located just north of Santa Cruz, which Erica manages, called Jade's Ranch. That's one of the places where rescued animals can be received. It's also a place where Erica conducts equine-assisted learning experiences, and that's something that I'd like very much to explore with you at another time. But I think today, given the situation that all of us are experiencing with the wildfires, I'd like to focus in on your work as a member of the equine evacuation team and what happened to you recently at Jade's Ranch. I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about the evacuation team in general and also the specific story of what took place at Jade's Ranch when it was a refuge and then suddenly it wasn't.
Yeah, the equine evacuation team is a team of horse people who are skilled in horse management and care and trailering. So we are called up by CAL FIRE when there's a need to evacuate large animals or farm animals in general, but usually it's horses. What we normally do when we're called up is we're called to a staging area where we park our trailers, and we have a ham radio operator who stays in touch with the fire department to find out if we need to go into a facility to rescue some animals. During the recent evacuation, besides dealing with all the animals that were evacuated to my ranch and having to evacuate those animals and the animals that are at the ranch, which is some 27 horses. So we received all these animals. The night that there was the lightning, we were all fearful. And then the next day, people started calling us to see if they could bring their horses over, and they did. So we received, I think, 19 horses over the course of the next few days, and assorted goats and donkeys. So I only went out on one evacuation. It was around 1:30 in the morning on Tuesday night, I think it was. The dates are all messed up in my mind. And I went to Bonnie Doon Equestrian Center and took 2 horses to Coast Stables, right across Highway 1 from Jade's Ranch. All of those horses were later evacuated to other facilities, but I didn't participate in that evacuation because I was evacuating horses from my facility.
What's involved when you go out to evacuate horses? I mean, you have to know what you're doing. And if we're talking about wildfires, the horses themselves must be rather disturbed.
It depends on how close you are to the fire. We had just had a fire right adjacent to our property in Wilder Ranch. We are right next to Wilder Ranch, and there was a fire probably 6 feet from some of our stalls. We don't know how it was started in Wilder Ranch. It ended up being about a 20-acre fire.
Oh my gosh.
We had a plan for our ranch to, if a fire came from that direction, to evacuate all of the animals that were on that side of the ranch to the other side of the ranch and other locations. We have a blind horse, and we put her and her buddy in the round pen, which is a sand round pen with metal panels surrounding it. And we put 2 other horses in our arena. There's a road between the arena and round pen and where the fire was. And we've worked really hard to establish fire breaks around the entire perimeter of the ranch using discs and blades on a tractor to make dirt trails that go all the way around the ranch. So that's very protective. And then we just started calmly walking horses from that side of the ranch to the other side of the ranch and put them in pastures. And it was actually very calm. The only part that wasn't calm was there were 3 horses that were still stuck down in stalls. And we decided to turn them loose up into one of our upper pastures and then try to funnel them across the ranch to the other side. And that took a little doing because they were pretty panicked. The flames were really close to their stalls. But eventually we got everybody over to the other side. No one got hurt. That was that fire. And then the lightning happened, and then we had the fire to the north of us. And we were asked to evacuate all of the animals. So first, the people that came in from outside came back and got their animals, except for 7 horses that a trainer that I know brought a trailer in to take up to the Jackson area. So she made 2 trips. Actually, she probably made 3 trips to take the 7 horses up there. And then we evacuated all the other people with their horses, and then the goats. We had to get the goats out of there. They came from Pie Ranch. And then some of the people at our ranch knew that their horses were very difficult or might be very difficult to load in a trailer. So they decided the day before we were actually told we had to leave to work on loading their horses. And then we were able to take them to a facility in Aptos that had enough room for, I think we have 20 horses. No, we have closer to 30 horses down there. So that's kind of what happened. And now the horses are down in this ranch in Aptos and up in Jackson, and some are somewhere else. I'm not exactly sure where they are. And then we had to bring hay down for the horses. So we trucked in all the hay we had in our barn, and then we had the hay seller truck another load of hay down to the ranch. And now we work in shifts to get the horses fed. We were very lucky to have that place to evacuate to. And then when the threat of the next lightning storm happened, we had to make a contingency plan in case we needed to evacuate that facility. So we made a plan of 3 different options of what to do with all the horses that were down there.
Is it very difficult to find places to take horses when disaster strikes or when it double strikes as it did in this case? I know there's been talk of Watsonville and using the Watsonville Fair facilities down there for animals.
Yeah, the fairgrounds is great. I've never been in there during an evacuation, but I know that there's probably hundreds of animals were sent down there, and they have stalls, they have places for people, they have resources. So a lot of animals ended up down there, and that was actually our number one thought when we thought we might have to be evacuated to where we were in Aptos, that we would probably get trailers and go to the fairgrounds. So we have enlisted 2 people with really large trailers to come down there in case we needed to get out of there. And then all the rest of us who have trailers have our trailers down there and ready to go.
You've been given special training in how to do this, but presumably not all of the people who own horses have this kind of training. Is it something that's very difficult to do? Should everybody be trained in this if they own a horse, particularly given what's happening now in California and is likely to happen in the future?
The training that the fire department does with us about equine evac is more about the protocols that the fire department uses in an evacuation situation. So what they train us on is what the hierarchy of decision making is for the fire department. There's another organization called Large Animal Rescue that's run by the Felton Fire Department. They're known all over the country for their skills at using fire equipment to pull horses out of ditches and flip trailers up and harness horses if they need to be picked up with a crane. And I've taken that training also. So there's 2 different kinds of training. And the equine evac, they are relying on people to be able to load a horse and take it.
You mentioned to me at one point that people knowing how or teaching their horses how to be loaded easily is something that everybody should know, and not necessarily everybody is skilled in. Could you say something about that?
Yeah, obviously a horse is not going to want to get in a trailer on its own. So it's really, really a good idea to practice trailer loading, because when you're in a hurry or there's an emergency, a horse can pick up on that energy and will think, oh, there's something wrong. I probably shouldn't get in that trailer. So you have to be calm and methodical, and you want to keep the horse thinking in the trailer, its nose pointed into the trailer, and not pull the horse into the trailer or whip the horse into the trailer, which is what some people do.
Mm.
It's good to have food in the trailer, so it's a nice place to be once they get in there. It is a skill. And for people whose horses don't lead very well, like they don't know not to pull back on a lead rope on a halter, it's even harder to load the horse because it just doesn't have manners on the halter or the lead rope. So getting it into a trailer can be more difficult. So, you know, when I talk to people, I encourage them to learn how to lead their horses properly and then how to load. And there's just, you know, certain little things that are good to know, like you get your horse in the trailer, but you don't tie it as soon as it gets in there because it could pull back and have a wreck. So you get the horse into the trailer and then you close the back or the panel and then you tie the horse. And some people don't know that that's the right order to do things in. So that's a little skill too.
With all the things that you're teaching at the ranch, do you think that maybe there should be a short course on that, given the fact that we may have other occasions where people need to know that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of ways to do that. I have a trainer who has offered to do a half-day trailer loading session to help people realize what the particular issues are that they have with their horses. The other thing you can do is just put a trailer in an arena open with food in it and just leave it there and let the horses figure out there's something nice in there and they'll go in on their own. That at least communicates to them that that's not a bad place to be. So if you have an arena and you have a trailer, that's actually another good way to go.
What else do people need to know, perhaps people that don't have as much experience as you do?
Well, the first thing I would say is if you're in a facility, make sure the facility has an evacuation plan and that you know what it is and that everyone else knows what it is. And set up a phone tree so that you can quickly get a hold of all the people who own horses so they can come over and help. I would say discourage people from outside of your ranch from coming, because when you're in the middle of an evacuation, having extra people who don't belong there is really difficult. That more often than not, they mean well, but they get in the way. Again, the practicing of the loading. One thing to think about if you have a barn is if you're taking the horses out of the barn and one gets loose, or you're just turning them loose from the barn, you need to close the doors of the barn, because if a horse panics, it might go back in there. And if it's on fire, you don't want the horses to go back into the barn.
And for people that have their horses at home, that have their own barns, you talk about having an evacuation plan. What does that consist of?
Well, making contacts with people who would be willing to receive your horses if you do have to evacuate, practicing the trailer loading, building a defense barrier around your ranch. If you don't have a trailer, knowing people who do have a trailer, or knowing somebody who's a hauler who can come and haul your horses for you in an emergency. If you have medicine that your horses need, grab the medicines. Have a way to get hay to the horses. I think those are the really important things. I would say, you know, people get panicky about their saddles and stuff like that. And I would say, you know, that's the last thing you should worry about when you're evacuating horses. Get the animals out and take 2 seconds if you have 2 seconds to grab your valuables. But it's more important to get the medicines for the horse or anything you need for treating a horse that's injured.
Is there a way that people can keep horses calm when you get to emergency situations like this?
The best way to keep a horse calm is to be calm yourself. If you're not calm, you should ask somebody else to do the job for you, because horses are mirrors. And if you're freaking out, they're going to freak out. We had a person who was pretty hysterical, and we just asked her to step to the side so that we could do our job. And luckily, the people at my barn are very confident and calm. So it went really like clockwork. We had one person who made 3 trips with horses, and then several other people who made trips down to that ranch in Aptos to get all the horses out. Donkeys are more difficult to load than horses. So if you have donkeys, you should really practice loading your donkey into a trailer. They are as stubborn as everyone says. And they kick.
And this is not, I'm sure, the first time that you have gone through this. There have been a number of large fires in and around the Santa Cruz area. Are there other experiences that you remember in particular?
Well, one was not an evac situation. I was riding my horse with a friend up to the top of Henry Cowell to the observation deck. And when we got up there, they were doing a back burn up there. So we had horses that were looking at flames that were all around them. And I don't know why, but they didn't worry about it. We just rode past it and rode back down the mountain. And that was the end of that. The only other time I've actually been called out to evacuation, I only made it to the staging area and they never called us up. But we sat there all day waiting to see if we were going to be called up for the fire.
So in the Martin fire and some of the other fires that people talk about that took place earlier on, you weren't involved in evacuations with any of those?
I was in the Martin fire receiving horses.
Mm-hmm.
We've had people come to the ranch before who were being evacuated.
Other than just the loading, and the loading being something that people should deal with early on with their horses, do you have any other advice for people that own horses? Because as we've seen and as we've said, this is not the only time that this situation will arise. It'll come up again in the future.
Yeah, I think unfortunately that's true. It wouldn't be a bad idea if a person doesn't feel confident with loading their horse to let someone else who would probably be available on the day work on loading the horse, so that there's somebody around who can do it, somebody with calm energy and not too forceful, but confident.
Does it make any difference to the horses in the way they behave, whether we're talking about wildfires or something else that could come up here in Santa Cruz, which is earthquakes? Do they react differently to those types of disasters?
I don't know, because I've never been around horses during an earthquake. I don't know what they do when there's an earthquake. I know that sometimes with thunderstorms, they can get frightened. With the first rain, they can get frightened. So it's like something has changed. I mean, really, with horses, anytime somebody rearranges the furniture around them, like there's a new plant, or there's a tractor that wasn't there before, or a birdie comes flying out of a bush, that's enough to startle a horse. They're very aware of their surroundings, much more than we are. So you just have to be ready.
In some of the reading I was doing, there were questions that were raised about if you have horses at home in your own place and you are not there, but something might come up. Is it safer for the horses to be kept inside, or should they be released and allowed to be free within the confines of where they live?
It really depends on the situation, how close a fire is, what kind of terrain they would be let loose in, if there's anybody around who could find them once they're wherever they are. If you're not home and you know that a fire is approaching, you should call the fire department and they'll get somebody from Equine Evac to come and get the horses, or they'll try anyway. When we made our evacuation plan for the place that we're at right now, they have 85 acres of pasture. And so in order to get prepared to release the horses there, we went up and opened all the gates that needed to be opened, so that they would be able to get out on the 85 acres. That was our second option. Our first option we considered was going to the fairgrounds. And so we have all our trailers ready down there and ready. And we have 2 other people ready to come in and move them if we have to move them.
If a horse gets loose, are they all chipped? Do they all have some kind of identification?
No, and it's not a bad idea to have your horse microchipped. What we've done with all of the horses down in Aptos is you can get grease markers, and you open up the grease marker and peel off the top layer. And we just wrote a big J on all of the horses in pink. So they all have a big J. So if they ever got loose and somebody found one and we saw a picture or whatever, we would know that's who it was. You can also write your phone number with the grease marker, or you can write a phone number on their hoof with a Sharpie. We also put duct tape tags on all their halters. So they all have a tag with a phone number and the name of the horse and the name of the owner.
And do horses mind? Because you talk about how sensitive they are to any change. If they're suddenly loaded and trucked to somewhere that they're not familiar with, and then the people that they know are not staying there with them, is that going to have a big impact on them, or will they just adapt?
It really depends on the horses. Some horses already have a lot of anxiety inside them because of the way they've been handled before or whatever their history is. If they are already anxious horses, they'll probably be more anxious in a situation like the fire. There's a thing that horses that are anxious do called wind sucking or cribbing, where they bite on a pipe and suck air in, and that gives them endorphins. Those kind of horses, if you see those horses, they have underlying anxiety. So they might be more difficult to load. I mean, if you notice there's a lot of horses that are wind sucking at your ranch, there's a problem.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like people to know for the benefit of their horses?
Have a plan, have a plan, have a plan. And have a phone list, have a way to get a hold of people, have fire extinguishers at your ranch, build a fire break around your ranch. Those are the really important things. And practice loading and practice leading. Those are the really important things.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome. Hopefully we won't be doing this again soon.
Hopefully not, but thank you for everything that you did this time, because I know that it took a great deal of energy.
I'm grateful to the people at my ranch for how calm they are and how confident they are. Our horses are very calm, and I think that's because of the people that are at the ranch.
But I think it also has a great deal to do with you, because as people can hear for themselves, you are also very calm and very confident.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Kate.
And my best wishes to you and all of your horses and animals.
Thank you.
Bye-bye then.
Bye.
Because we have a little bit of time left in our program today, I want to add a coda to our story. When I introduced Erica, I mentioned her love of animals, and that in addition to her volunteer work in equine evacuation, she also participates in the rescue of sick or injured marine mammals. This little addition to our story didn't involve Erica directly, but it is very much in the spirit of Erica. It concerns the evacuation of marine mammals from the coastal campus of the University of Santa Cruz's Long Marine Lab. The information comes from a newsletter article of August 24, 2020, written by Tim Stevens. Stevens writes that long before campus officials actually ordered the evacuation of the UCSC Coastal Science Campus, the ash from the wildfires raging in the Santa Cruz Mountains was already falling on the lab's saltwater pools, and the air was thick with smoke. People were wearing masks, but the animals had no such filtered protection, and researchers feared for their lungs, and staff worried that there wouldn't be time to get the animals out in the event of an emergency evacuation order. Now, the well-trained pinnipeds, a California sea lion, a harbor seal, a ringed seal, and 2 bearded seals, readily made their way into large kennels and cages for transportation to the Marine Mammal Center in Sausalito. And let me just add that the Marine Mammal Center at Moss Landing, where Erica BERG volunteers, in rescuing ill or injured animals from beaches is connected to this same Sausalito center. The article then goes on to say that moving the dolphins and the Hawaiian monk seal, named Kikoa, each of whom weighed over 400 pounds, was more challenging. Trainer Bo Richter convinced Kikoa to haul out of his pool, slide across the deck, and scooch down a ramp into a large cage, a string of behaviors it had taken a year of training to achieve. However, to move the dolphins, it was necessary to drain their pool and place each dolphin into a soft, fleece-lined sling. And that brings me to the part that really moved me to include this end to the story. Stevens writes that as the water level dropped in their pool, the dolphins comforted each other by keeping their flukes in contact. Once they were in their slings, the dolphins were each moved by forklift to a custom-made dolphin transporter filled with salt water for the trip by refrigerated truck. They had to go through the Central Valley. This involved triple-digit temperatures and be transported all the way to San Diego SeaWorld. The article says, although separated visually, the two pair-bonded dolphins immediately struck up a squeaking, whistling conversation in the truck that lasted the entire duration of the trip to Southern California. And Donley, this is the name of one of the dolphins, periodically raised his head up to peek at his traveling buddy. Thank you for joining us here at Exploring Santa Cruz on KSQD, KSQD 90.7 FM, and online at ksqd.org.